It's the first day of November here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with a security meeting between Seoul and Washington. The foreign and defense chiefs of South Korea and the United States gathered in Washington, D.C. with a collective voice against North Korea's troop deployment to Russia. And the U.S. believes the North Korean soldiers are expected to enter combat in the coming days. North Korea announced this morning it successfully test-fired a new Hwasong-19 intercontinental ballistic missile yesterday, saying the launch set milestones and perpetuating the absolute security of the regime's armed forces. In Spain, at least 158 people are confirmed dead, with many still missing from the worst flooding disaster in decades. Senior foreign and defense officials from Seoul and Washington have met to address concerns about North Korea's troop deployment to Russia. While the U.S. now believes North Korean soldiers are set to join combat in the coming days. Our foreign affairs correspondent Parental reports.
A total of about 10,000 North Korean soldiers are in Russia, and 8,000 of them appear to be at Ukraine's border. That's according to the U.S. Secretary of State as he made remarks alongside his South Korean counterpart during a press conference following 2+2 talks between foreign and defense chiefs from Seoul and Washington.
We now assess that there are some 10,000 North Korean soldiers in total in Russia. And the most recent information indicates that as many as 8,000 of those North Korean forces have been deployed to the Kursk region. We've not yet seen these troops deploy into combat against Ukrainian forces, but we would expect that to happen in the coming days.
Blinken added that Russia has been training North Korean soldiers in artillery, unmanned aerial vehicles, and basic infantry operations, indicating that they fully intend to use these forces in frontline operations. He also warned that should these troops engage in combat or combat support operations against Ukraine, they would become legitimate military targets. South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol said the two countries agreed to take necessary measures accordingly as circumstances evolve.
We condemned North Korea's dispatch of troops in the strongest language possible and called for an immediate stop to these actions and all other illegal military cooperation.
Cho added that the two sides also reaffirmed the goal of complete denuclearization of North Korea and that they strongly condemned the regime's long-range ballistic missile launch carried out the day before. Thursday's talks come after the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations said North Korean soldiers wearing Russian uniforms and carrying Russian equipment are heading toward Ukraine, and that as many as 4,500 of them are expected to be at Russia's border with Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who has been calling for support from allies and partners, said what the country needs most from South Korea is an air defense system. In an interview with South Korean broadcaster KBS, he said Ukraine will send a request to South Korea, asking for weapon support, once it's fully confirmed that the North Korean troops have come to fight against Ukrainian citizens. Amid rising concerns, during a UN Security Council meeting in New York on Thursday, the deputy U.S. ambassador to the UN directly confronted Russia.
And I have a very respectful question for my Russian colleague. Does Russia still maintain that there are no DPRK troops in Russia? That's my only question and my final point. Specifically.
But the Russian representative at the meeting refused to comment, and the session was adjourned. Parental, Arirang News.
North Korea says the missile it test-launched on Thursday was its new Hwasong-19 ICBM and that it was successful. There, its leader Kim Jong-un boasted about his regime's absolute irreversible nuclear dominance. Kim Jong-se reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un personally oversaw Thursday's Hwasong-19 ICBM launch, hailing it as a defining success. The regime's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported on Friday. In his statement, Kim said the missile success showcases North Korea's absolute and irreversible position in nuclear capabilities. Pyongyang described the latest missile as the final and ultimate version of its ICBMs, reportedly an upgrade from the Hwasong-18. The South Korean military indicated that Pyongyang may have used a newer type of solid fuel, which experts believe could enable quicker deployment and enhanced mobility. Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo were quick to respond. In a joint statement, South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and Japanese Foreign Minister Iwaya Takeshi condemned the launch, saying it poses a severe threat to regional peace. The three ministers urged North Korea to immediately cease its provocative and destabilizing actions, highlighting the missile test as a violation of multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also released a statement on Thursday local time, strongly condemning the launch. He urged for de-escalation and renewed dialogue, stressing that diplomacy is the only path to lasting peace and the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Reuters reported that the United Nations Security Council is expected to address the launch following a request by several nations, including South Korea, the U.S., France, and the UK. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
And now, what is this new Hwasong-19 ICBM that North Korea claims to have test-fired on Thursday? And how much of a threat is this? Let's turn to Professor Min Jung-un for more this morning. Welcome back, Professor Min.
Good morning.
So let's cut to the chase. What about this Hwasong-19 intercontinental ballistic missile? What do we know about this missile so far?
Yes, the South Korean military said Thursday that the missile was fired at a lofted angle at about 7:10 a.m. from Pyongyang area, and it flew about 1,000 kilometers before coming down in the East Sea. Mm-hmm. And the missile was assessed as a new solid-fuel ICBM, which North Korea calls Hwasong-19. And the flight time of the ICBM was 86 minutes, and its maximum altitude was over 7,000 kilometers, and both of them are known to be their highest levels ever. And the existing Hwasong-18 is estimated to fly over 15,000 kilometers, which is enough to strike the entire United States. If it is launched at a normal angle, like 30 to 45 degrees, but the range of this missile, Hwasong-19, is increased even further. And it also said that the South Korean military's initial assessment shows that there is a possibility that North Korea test-fired a new type of solid-fuel long-range ballistic missile, and that the missile was launched from the 12-axis tail that North Korea recently revealed, which means that North Korea's the technology has been improved. But it said that the further analysis is needed to determine whether the missile is an improved version of the existing Hwasong-18 or a completely new ICBM like the Hwasong-19. Meanwhile, North Korean state media described the ICBM as an ultimate powerful offensive means and the ultimate version of its long-range missile series. It also reported that Chairman Kim expressed satisfaction for the launch. And last but not least, the ICBM launch came just a few days before the U.S. presidential election. So it is said that the intention of the North Korea's military provocation was to show off its capability to deliver nuclear warhead to the United States and divert attention from recent condemnation of its troop deployment to Russia.
Professor Min, what's also notable is that the leader, Kim Jong-un, made note of the missile launch just hours after the missile launch yesterday. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that the missile launch was a well-planned one?
Yes, I think so. The Chairman Kim claimed that the ICBM launch was an appropriate military activity to signal their will to respond to the enemy. And he said at the ICBM launch site Thursday that the ICBM launch was appropriate. Again, the military activity that signaled their will to respond to the enemies who have recently aggravated the regional situation and threatened the security of the country, and that it was an essential process of upgrading the country's strategic attack force. And he also emphasized that North Korea would never change its line of strengthening its nuclear force. In addition, he emphasized the necessity of ICBM as a strategic deterrent. And meanwhile, the North Korea state media North Korea said the Minister of the Foreign Defense said that the ICBM launch was carried out under the order of the head of state, Chairman Kim, and renewed the latest record of strategic missile capabilities and demonstrated the modernity and reliability of its strategic deterrence. So it shows that the missile launch was a well-planned test, and it also proves that North Korea will never give up its nuclear and missile capabilities.
Well, it's not just missile launch. Speculations are high that the North may also stage what will be the regime's 7th nuclear test, around the time of the U.S. election, which is already next week. But possibly at Tunnel 3 of the Punggye nuclear site, experts say. Professor Min, why Tunnel 3? Why not 1 or 2 or 4?
Well, you may remember what happened when South Korea led the three nations the nuclear talks among South Korea, U.S., and North Korea, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And at the time, North Korea had an event to blow up the Punggye nuclear site when it engaged in the nuclear talks with the United States, like the performers,
right,
about 5 or 6 years ago. Then it was known that Tunnel 3 or Tunnel 4 could be reconstructed or renewed, and the Tunnel 1 or 2 was gone. So the Tunnel 3 or Tunnel 4 could be available if North Korea wanted to resume its nuclear test. And after the Hanoi summit failed to reach an agreement, North Korea tried to restore the Punggye nuclear site for possibly another nuclear test if necessary. So it is likely that Tunnel 3 could be used if North Korea wanted to take the 7th nuclear test. But it's not still clear whether North Korea would take another nuclear test like before or after the U.S. president election, because taking a nuclear test, another nuclear test, could significantly affect North Korea's international standing and its relations with major countries like the U.S., Russia, and China.
Well, whether it's a missile launch or a nuclear test, the North, we all know, will make the decisions that work in favor of the regime. Professor Min, do you think a nuclear test is the best call the regime can make at the moment?
Well, I'm not sure if another nuclear test would be the best call for North Korea. It's mainly because, again, another nuclear test will significantly negatively affect North Korea's international standing and, more importantly, its relations with its major countries like the U.S., China, and Russia. Compared to the missile propagations, U.S. will likely be much tougher in coping with North Korea's nuclear test. And U.S. will also strongly pressure China to do more to cope with North Korea's nuclear provocations. And in the face of its strategic competition with the U.S., China, one of many its relations with the United States. So there is a possibility that China could be more active to play a greater role in pressuring North Korea in coping with North Korea's nuclear provocations. And Russia could also face an embarrassing situation because it will be criticized for the nuclear test on the basis of its increasing military cooperation with North Korea. So taken together, I think North Korea's another nuclear test will come with a huge opportunity cost. So I think that North Korea would be careful to make a decision to go for another nuclear test.
Alrighty, Professor Min, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
A Czech antitrust watchdog has rejected complaints filed by energy firms Westinghouse from the U.S. and EDF from France over the Czech government's decision to choose South Korea's KHNP as the preferred bidder to build nuclear units. Now, the Czech Office for the Protection of Competition said in its statement on Wednesday The proceedings on the proposals from the U.S. and French companies were mostly terminated, while other parts of their proposals were rejected. It added that Westinghouse's objection to the contracting authorities' use of a security exception was dismissed, as it was filed after the March 2022 deadline, adding that it was submitted in August. However, it also said the decisions are not final and an appeal could be launched. The antitrust watchdog had ordered a temporary hold on the deal with a South Korean consortium led by Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power after competing bidders filed appeals. Now, with the U.S. presidential election less than a week away, it's too tight to call, as its key battleground states are set to make difference for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Lee Seung-jae reports.
With the U.S. presidential election now just 5 days away, Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and Republican candidate Donald Trump are neck and neck in key battleground states, as well as across the country. While most opinion polls show Harris holding on to a slight lead nationally, the key battleground states that will determine the actual election result are continuing to see a close race, with different polls showing different leaders. In a nationwide poll conducted by The Economist and YouGov on 1,466 registered voters across the U.S. from October 26 to the 29th, Harris received 47% support, while Trump received 46%. When limiting the poll to voters who intend to vote, the vice president received 49%, while the former president received 46%. In a survey conducted by UMass Lowell and YouGov from October 16th to the 23rd on 800 registered voters in Pennsylvania, 48% said they intended to vote for Harris, while 47% said they would vote for Trump. However, a poll conducted by Emerson College on 860 likely voters from the state, Trump leads Harris by 49% to 48%. A Bloomberg News survey on Pennsylvania shows Harris having a slight lead over Trump. With different polls showing different leaders for the state of Pennsylvania, it's too close to call, with the state expected to be the biggest battleground state for the two candidates. Since 1976, the candidates that took Pennsylvania won the presidential election 10 out of 12 times, with George W. Bush's wins in 2000 and 2004 being the only exceptions. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And the result of the presidential race will also decide the future course of global trade, including South Korea, which is heavily dependent on exports. Our Moon Hae-ryun has more.
The two candidates, incumbent Vice President Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump, propose different tariff policies that have caught the attention of South Korean companies. Harris supports a targeted tariff strategy affecting specific goods and countries, while Trump plans broad tariffs on nearly all imports to replace the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act. These laws directly influence investments from South Korean firms in U.S. facilities. The IRA has been giving tax credits to South Korean electric vehicle battery companies such as LG Energy Solution and SK On. The CHIPS Act gives companies subsidies to build plants in the U.S. Samsung Electronics is due to receive up to $6.4 billion of subsidies to build its foundry in Texas, while SK Hynix is due to receive up to $450 million in subsidies to build its packaging facility in Indiana. If a future Trump administration reduces or removes subsidies, these changes will diminish the strategic appeal of South Korean companies' investment in the U.S. and also hit them financially. Experts say that this, however, is an unlikely scenario.
In order to remove the subsidies, President Trump will have to remove the laws, and that will require approval from Congress. So not only will Trump have to become the president, but the House of Representatives and the Senate both have to be in Republican hands.
Both candidates plan to impose high tariffs on Chinese imports, intensifying U.S.-China trade tensions that affect South Korean companies. Trump proposes a 60% tariff on all Chinese goods with even higher rates on vehicles, while the Biden-Harris administration has targeted tariffs on Chinese EVs, solar cells, and restrictions on U.S. investments in advanced tech in China. South Korean firms like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, essential to global tech supply chains, rely heavily on exports to both the US and China.
The majority of our semiconductors are used in smartphones and computers, with China responsible for 60 to 70% of exports, so this is likely to take a hit.
Tariffs are also likely to affect consumer prices in the US as manufacturing costs increase and the cost of products with limited domestic alternatives rise. This could have a global impact if interest rates are increased to tackle inflation, as central banks around the world, including the Bank of Korea, look to the Federal Reserve's monetary policies. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a look at the stories from around the world with our Kim Xiang. Good morning, Xiang.
Good morning, Dami.
So, starting in Spain today, where the death toll from severe flooding has increased since your report yesterday. Fill us in.
Yes, that's right, Dami. The death toll has risen to at least 158 people after torrential rain early this week caused the worst flooding disaster seen in Spain in decades. Now, search and rescue operations are continuing in eastern Spain with an unconfirmed number of people still missing. That is adding to fears that the death toll will increase, with Spain's defense minister saying we are not optimistic. Spain's Valencia region saw more than a year's worth of rainfall in just 8 hours on Tuesday, which the country's weather agency called extraordinary. Authorities say more rain is expected to hit the region on Friday, while Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez warned people to seek shelter. Now, according to BBC, Valencia residents have called the situation a nightmare, while saying that everybody in the region knows someone who has died. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister visited the Emergency Command Center some 16 kilometers away from Valencia City on Thursday, where he said that the Spanish government will commit all the resources to find the missing people for as long as necessary. Now, the floods are the deadliest seen in Europe since 2021. Moving over to Turkey, where hundreds gathered in one of Istanbul's squares on Thursday to protest against the arrest and removal from office of a district mayor. The mayor of Istanbul's Esenyurt district, Ahmet Ezer, from Turkey's main opposition Republican People's Party, was arrested on Wednesday for alleged links to a banned Kurdish militant group, the Kurdistan Workers' Party. 64-year-old Ezer, a university professor who was elected in March, saw his home raided by anti-terrorism police early on Wednesday morning on a suspicion of holding membership in the outlawed PKK. Now, his position was replaced by Istanbul's deputy governor on Thursday. The Republican People's Party's leader, Özgür Özel, and other politicians described the move a coup, while Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu called Özer's arrest an attempt to undermine law and democracy. Millions of Indians began celebrating Diwali, the Hindu festival of lights, on Thursday, with fireworks and oil lamps illuminating cities. Diwali, which comes from the Sanskrit word Deepavali, meaning row of lights, is one of India's most widely celebrated holidays of the year, symbolizing the victory of light over darkness, marked by the return of Lord Ram, a major deity in Hinduism. Diwali is also a national holiday across India and is typically celebrated with family and friends, exchanging gifts and saying prayers, while many homes light candles or earthen oil lamps as part of the celebrations.
Southern parts of Korea are having a rainy morning due to the indirect effect of Typhoon Kongray. Rain is forecast to lash southern regions into early tomorrow, and Jeju will see rain into Saturday afternoon. And especially those on Jeju need to prepare for torrential rain with 20 to 60 millimeters an hour of downpours, with a heavy rain advisory issued for the entire island. The rest of the southern regions could see up to 100 millimeters of rain. Showers will bring down the highs below normal in southern regions. The central regions will also notice cooler highs, but under sunny skies. So Seoul gets up to 19 degrees Celsius. Gwangju only topping out at 17 degrees. Torrential rain and strong winds will lash southern provinces into tomorrow. So please stay away from the water. Unlike southern regions, central parts of Korea should stay sunny through the weekend with warmer temperatures. Then there will be rain in the capital on Monday, which will take us into late autumn. Well, that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up our morning edition of Arirang News. Thanks for watching.
AI, what are some dishes you should try in Korea?
Recommended food to eat in Korea are Korean barbecue, fried chicken, kimchi, kimbap, 국밥.
에이, 이걸로는 부족하지. 진짜 한국에선 어떻게 먹는지 알려줄까?
K 바비큐? 신김치랑 먹어야지.
치킨? 클래식한 치킨부터 한강뷰 치킨까지. 치맥 페스티벌은 처음이지? 김치?
종류만큼 먹는 법도 가지각색.
김밥? 시장에선 이렇게, 산에선 이렇게, 바다에선 이렇게.
국밥? 취향 따라, 입맛 따라. 마무리까지 완벽하게.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸?
세상에 기가 막힌 뷰다. 김치 스마일 해피하게. 아우 시원하긴 하다 여기 들어오니까. 야! 바다 속으로 들어가는 걸 말하자면.
뻥 뚫려요 완전.
맛있어요.
올지도로 놀러와.
The rich colors and inspiring music of K-animation spark the imagination and capture the eyes and ears of children around the world. Non-violent Korean animation that focuses on good influence. Through adventure and friendship, learn valuable lessons, and realize the importance of friends. Covering topics such as family, friends, and courage, they help children learn how to interact with the world. Embark on imaginative adventures with new friends and dream together. K Animation's special stories will warm your heart.
Completely new. But something anyone can relate with. Flawlessly made. And tears that go with it. K-drama. Korea is coming at you with another story to tell.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day. We're News Generation.
Bring news just for you. It's Friday, November 1st here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and you're watching News Generation. Today, we're joined by Fabio Gonzalez.
Happy Friday.
And Happy November.
Happy November.
Happy November. And Julian Kim.
Happy Friday and Happy November.
Happy Friday and Happy November. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. So, we're going to move on to our main discussion of today. It's Friday, time to explore topics and issues that resonate with young people around the world here on News Generation. Today's topic is tackling low birth rates, an issue we've covered before on the show multiple times. And with the situation becoming more urgent, it's time to take another look. So with birth rates dropping across the world, countries are scrambling to find ways to encourage young people to start families. So I want to ask you guys, first off, what's holding back young people from having children or thinking about starting a family?
Yeah, well, there are a plethora of reasons why young people are holding back from having children. So in summation, we are rightfully skeptical about raising children in an increasingly hostile and volatile world. This decision to postpone parenthood is heavily influenced by economic conditions, culture, and global situations. Now, many find the cost of living to be an increasing burden, and adding children to that equation will be extremely challenging for the MZ generation, who are already struggling to navigate such a fickle economy. We also only grew up knowing the climate crisis, and it's just getting worse. So in combination with all of that, there are also societal issues that do not really support new parents. For starters, there are deeper social issues such as gender discrimination, and also there is stigma against more non-traditional households. So ultimately, I believe that people who want to have children want to raise children in an environment where they feel safe and secure, and they can also see a bright future not only for themselves, but also for their children and future generations after that. Now, this topic can be contentious, but I think highlighting these issues is really important to enact change.
Right. So in short, we all want the best for our children, but because of so many issues that we're facing in our generation right now, such as climate change, discrimination, and rising prices, we're becoming more reluctant to start a family and give birth to children. So what could be some other reasons, Fabio?
Well, exactly. I agree. And I feel like as a whole, we have transformed our lifestyle into a more individualized experience. We shifted from being pressured by these traditional values to actually focusing on what we really want to do. And building a family and having kids is not seen as a necessity anymore. And it's actually overshadowed by other things like personal success and happiness, which are like the main priorities of young people. So when traditional traditional values become social pressure, I feel like rather than functioning as a motivator, it becomes an annoyance. And when we add that to the strong economic pressure that most people have to deal with nowadays, we consequently see the birth rate decrease. And if we look at the screen, a Korean marriage company did a survey with unmarried Koreans, and among them, it was 1,000 American Koreans, and 40% of them stated that they didn't want kids, with the cost of childcare and future uncertainty being mentioned as the top reasons. But surprisingly, most young people are actually concerned about these low birth rates. They are aware that we have an aging population, and at some point it would be unsustainable for young people to become the only active population that would have to sustain a majority inactive or retired older group. So young people are aware of the problem, but they are also reluctant to harm their own situation with the complications of having kids. So it's basically putting yourself first over the country's development and the country's growth.
Right, so this change in values among our generation when compared to the previous generations could be the reason why we are seeing dropping birth rates across the world. Now, before we discuss the issue even further, we're first going to invite an expert to help us understand the situation better. Today, we're joined by Lee Ha-yan, a research professor at the Humanities and Social Sciences Research Center of the Institute of EU Studies at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Welcome, Professor Lee, to the show.
Hello.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Professor. So our first question to you is, starting with South Korea, how severe is the birth rate issue right now, and what makes it especially concerning?
Currently, South Korea's low birth rate is a very serious issue, as you mentioned. As just 0.72 in 2003, Korea birth rate is less than half the OECD average and even lower than war-torn Ukraine. This decline isn't just about number, it has enormous implications for Korea's economy, society, and even national security. So if this trend continues, Korea's population could fall below 50 million by around 2040, posing significant challenges for economic growth and the sustainability of the pension system.
What are some of the limitations of Korea's current policies, and where do you see room for improvement?
Korea's low rate policies face limitations because they primarily rely on economic incentives like tax breaks and housing benefits without addressing deeper social and cultural factors. While financial support is helpful, it doesn't fundamentally change perceptions around marriage and parenthood. To make a real impact, Korea needs policies that promote work-life balance, shared parenting, and supportive social culture, recognizing the evolving values of the young generation. Structural change in workplace norms and gender roles in parenting are essential for any lasting improvement in birth rates.
Great. So, Professor, in your opinion, what practical solutions would encourage more young people to have children?
In my opinion, young people today feel a significant burden when it comes to the idea of marriage and starting a family. With high living costs and intense competition, relationship and marriage often seems like unnecessary or difficult choice. So this perception pushes marriage and childbirth rate even further out of reach. And I believe it's an issue that financial support alone can't fully resolve. So I think what I just mentioned aligns with what you've been discussing before. I believe it's most important to create a society where married people are happier than those who aren't, and couples with children are happier than those without. Lastly, promoting positive perceptions around family life, those supporting policies and awareness campaign can help foster a culture where family is seen as a rewarding goal. It's my opinion.
Hope we can foster that culture and environment. All right, Professor Lee, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Right, so I want to ask the same question to our panelists. Let's now talk about some practical solutions that could actually encourage our generation to have children. So we've prepared a short O and X session, so please raise the O and X line, depending on whether these measures would motivate you to start a family. So let's go with the first question. Practical and continuous financial support. Do you think this will be enough to encourage you to start a family? What do you think? So Fabio chose O and Julian chose X.
Yes.
Let's start with Fabio.
For me, it would be important to have that support. It wouldn't be a deal breaker. I feel like there are other important things that I should take into consideration. But obviously, financial support for me would be very important.
It's really important.
Yes.
Right, because you can't really nurture a child without financial stability, right?
Exactly, and as we just saw in the survey, one of the main reasons why people didn't want to have kids is
financial pressure.
Financial pressure, exactly.
Then Julian, why did you choose X?
So I do agree that financial support from the government will alleviate many financial burdens for families. I think that is just adding a band-aid to the solution. I feel like we need to put more effort towards creating a stable job market where people can feel secure in their jobs and feel they can grow professionally. So I think implementing systems where people can individually support their family themselves without having to be necessarily reliant on a government would be beneficial.
So kind of creating a self-sustaining environment, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Now let's move on to the second question. Number 2, government programs offering affordable access to nannies or housekeepers to help with childcare and household tasks. 1, 2, 3. So Fabio X, Julian X, both X. So why?
Interesting idea. Like, I didn't really expect this kind of question, but I feel like it's a great service if you need it. So I would prefer it to just be something that the couple would get to choose, not necessarily something that is just available for everyone, because it goes case by case, I guess.
So you would rather opt for a more catered support?
Exactly, yes. I feel like family comes first, and then those extra help, that kind of extra help would come in second place.
What about you, Julian?
So I honestly didn't think this was something the government would think to focus on. But again, I feel like it's the same point as I mentioned earlier. People are struggling to access affordable housing, especially young people. So I feel like if we actually put an effort towards making a system again to allow people to have access to affordable housing, that will have a much more impact on birth rates than nannies and housekeeping services that aren't even necessarily free either.
So you think something else should be prioritized, for example, housing, which is a more bigger concern for our generation.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, number 3, guaranteed maternity or paternity leave, even if unpaid. 1, 2, 3. O and O. Why?
Again, it's not the most important thing for me. I feel like work conditions are important, but among them, I feel like if you're deciding whether or not to have kids, being able to actually have a parental leave would be necessary.
Especially when the baby is very young.
Exactly. I feel like if you're working in a company and you have that possibility, it would be easier for you to actually go to the next level.
Right, so having that option, right?
Exactly.
What about you, Julian?
So I agree completely. I think working conditions is something we should be focusing on. But I think guaranteed parental leave in general is actually an effort towards bettering working conditions for people who want to raise children. And I especially think it's important to emphasize paternal leave too, culturally, because I feel it's just not as accepted. And so while I do think that parental leave should be paid, I think that as long as people feel secure in their job and they can feel like they can take a parental leave that's guaranteed, I think it'd be beneficial.
Right, and especially as many mothers are now working when compared to the past, I think especially guaranteeing both maternity and paternity leave is important. Now, we're also going to listen to our viewers. So based on the statistic Fabio mentioned earlier, financial pressure still seems to be the #1 factor that's making our generation reluctant to have children. So we asked our viewers whether financial support would encourage them to have children. So we did a survey between October 24th and 30th with a question, would you consider having children if more economic support measures were in place? Among the 605 votes, 66% of our respondents said yes, while 34% said said no. And here are some of the comments given by our viewers. I would say yes, and the reason is I should like to deeply consider having a child, and giving economic solutions will be better if we follow every objective. Another comment said, I can't afford a house, so I will not be bringing up any children in poverty. Our last comment, yes, but other quality of life factors such as reducing weekly working hours and minimizing career interruptions should also be addressed. So financial support does seem to be helpful in motivating our generation to start a family, but of course there are other diverse support that our generation is wanting as well. So let's now expand our discussion and take a look at the situation in other countries, because once again the low birth rate isn't just a concern here in Korea, with many countries struggling with similar challenges. So what kind of policies, Fabio, are other countries implementing, and have there been any successful ones?
Well, you see, I come from Spain, right? And the European Union also faces a very low natality rate.
Right.
Spain has the second lowest after Malta. And they show a very huge gap between the amount of kids people want and the ones they actually have. And the problem grows bigger, with many claiming that we are currently facing a demographic suicide. And I tried doing some research on these policies on the EU, but I couldn't find many that actually had relevant impact, which shows that current measures that put effort on actually tackling this problem, although sometimes successful, are not sufficient enough. And this may be because having kids is such a life-changing decision. That it's not that easy to just decide to have them because you have monetary support or because your work conditions have improved. I feel like it goes beyond that. Obviously, we talked about economic pressure. That is important, but I think that there's also a problem with values.
Right. For example, career-wise and so much more.
Career-wise, professionally, mentally too. I feel like mental health and having a stable position in your life and really achieving what you really wanted is kind of like a first step to actually find stability and take it to the next level.
Right. So much to consider when you're deciding to start a family or not. Now, what could be some other examples from other parts of the world, Julian?
Yeah, so many countries are implementing policies in an effort to increase natality rates. According to The Lancet, by 2050, over 3/4 of countries will not have high enough fertility rates to sustain population size over time. So in response, many countries are actively putting an effort to increase their low birth rates. European countries such as Sweden, France, and Germany offer some sort of family benefit where parents can get parental leave and even financial support. Similarly, Singapore offers parents a baby bonus, which is a cash gift upon the birth of their child. So while the success of these initiatives is mixed, many of these countries have seen some slight increase in their natality rates. However, it is hard to say that there is a significant impact based from these policies alone.
And I think this is especially true because these policies have been implemented for a short amount of time, because low birth rate, we've been struggling with this issue not for a long time, not for decades. It's become a serious issue over the decades, but now I think it's not been long since a lot of countries started rolling up their sleeves and coming up with more solutions. So I think we'll have to wait and see whether these measures are effective. Now, ending off today's episode, I think this is a really important question for us to consider. As mentioned earlier, we've talked about low birth rate issues a lot on NewsGen, but I kind of wonder, is the low birth rate a matter of insufficient support, or does it indicate a shift in values among our generation? Because both of you guys mentioned it, but compared to previous generations, it seems like many young people today are less inclined to have children, regardless of whether there's more support or not. So I want to end off by asking, do you think boosting or overcoming the low birth rate is possible?
I think measures like having better support is important for people that do want to have kids. But sometimes in our current state, I feel like their situation doesn't allow that to be a priority. But honestly, if I'm super honest, just thinking about my environment, the people that I surround myself with, and people my age overall, I feel like they just don't want to have kids. Most of them. Or even if they think about the idea, it doesn't become a main goal or a main priority.
Why would be some of the reasons behind that?
I feel like they have motivations, self-motivations, and they want to, they are ambitious about their professional career, and they want to do a lot of things, and they don't see themselves carrying or building a family until they reach that success, which might or might not come. So it really becomes a dilemma of where do I stop my tracks to actually settle up.
And what do I define as success?
Exactly, because if I think about myself, I'm 23 years old. I see kids as a very distant issue to ponder about. And no monetary support could actually buy me into having to stop my career, stop my studies, and actually start a family, because it really makes you stop for a while.
Right.
You really need that time to settle down and take care of that child. So I feel like it's very important to like actually think about it. And I feel like relationship dynamics are also becoming more diverse these days, and people are very wary about who they spend their time with. And so I feel like that also plays a big part. Obviously, we can talk about marriage too. People are not marrying that much, but outside of that, I feel like you really, if you're building a family with another person and you want to have kids, then you really need to see that person as someone who you're going to spend most of your time with.
Your lifelong partner.
If it's not going to be long-lasting, it might, bring a lot of problems, especially to the child. So that's also something to ponder about. There's so many things to take into consideration when we talk about kids, and all of them are very important. So obviously, I feel like low birth rates, they really mean a huge problem for the country development. It is a problem overall to society, but it's not a problem that concerns us in an individual level. For me, it is not my problem. It is a problem of my country, so that becomes a dilemma of what should I do? Should I just focus on myself, or should I focus on the big picture?
Right, so it's definitely a tricky question to consider and answer. Now, what are your thoughts on this, Julian?
Yeah, everything that Fabio said, I completely agree. And I do believe that there is a shift in value amongst young people with how they want to live their life. Actually, I just found out recently that this might be a term popular in America, but there is an acronym called DINK, which stands for Dual Income No Kids, and they also have something called DINKWAD, which is Dual Income No Kids with a Dog. Yeah, so this acronym highlights that many millennials and Gen Z individuals prioritize financial security and hold evolving attitudes toward parenthood. So while I think it's possible to address declining birth rates, this issue is complex and requires navigating a multitude of reasons of why people are not having children.
Right.
So, as Fabio mentioned, it is important to respect people's individual choices regarding parenthood, as these decisions are deeply personal and influenced by a whole variety of factors. However, many people who desire to have children, they simply feel they can't afford to have them. If governments around the world genuinely want to foster change, I strongly implore them to listen to young people. We want to financially support ourselves comfortably and feel safe to raise families. We want to raise children in a world where people are free from discrimination based on race, gender, sexuality, and socioeconomic class. Establishing these systems that allow individuals to create the necessary environment for raising a family is crucial, I believe. So if we can see that genuine efforts to address societal and economic issues, as well as tackling climate change, we can see, I believe that we can see an actual change in lower birth rates, because this issue is heavily weighing on our shoulders right now.
Right, we do have a lot on our shoulders, and we'll bring more relevant discussions here on News 10 until we find that answer to the question. And that's all from us today, but News 10 will be back next Monday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks today to Fabio Gonzalez.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Julian Kim.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for watching, and hope you have a nice weekend. We are News Generation.
How to survive in Korea. One room. So, you're surviving in Korea if you've signed a contract